Ahoy, everyone. This is David Eugene Perry, once again in the Zoom room with interesting people, colleagues, friends, and experts in their field. And the person I'm speaking to today is someone I've known longer than probably either of us want to admit to, the person that I consider the most tech-savvy woman I've ever met, the most tech-savvy person, and certainly the most tech-savvy lesbian. Welcome to the Zoom room, Karen Wickre. How are you, Karen?
Hey, David, it's great to see you, and I'm doing well.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, because I may have been telling the story wrong for years, that we met at the first ever Digital Queers event at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts.
That is probably right, and that would have been 1993, maybe.
Yes, 93.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
for those people who haven't read you, seen your tweets, followed your fascinating career, give us the quick Karen Wickre career saga since 1993 to now. Wow,
No,
2023. I just
yeah.
did the math.
I'm
Sorry.
sorry, we don't have enough time. No. Gosh, well, I mean, I've always been a writer and editor. I've always been interested in clear communications, which uh, I fell into tech in the 80s when I went to work for Computer Magazine. There were used to be scads of them, and many were based in San Francisco, where I still live. And that just was the opening door to a long career in technology and technology businesses. I had about 10 unforgettable, fairly early years at Google. Um, and that was a game changer for lots of reasons. I'd certainly never worked for a company that big, even when it was, under 5,000 people, which it's not anymore. And I had and that was on the communications team where I was basically the editor of the company blog, the Google blog. And it turns out that was a pioneer in how companies publish their news and information.
Right, right. I remember it.
Yeah, and my goal then, as now, was no bullshit, to the extent possible, no bullshit. And making news and information from the company more interesting with a point of view, not a corporate voice, but individual voices from people who were subject matter experts, that kind of thing. And I went from there to Twitter, which at the time shared the same kinds of values as Google as a company, was a very different company. And I had more trouble there. Sorry, that is my dog with a squeak toy. If you hear anything in the background.
That's fine. One of the things that I think has come out of COVID that I will fondly remember is how personal various
I know.
interviews have gotten. I
Exactly.
forget who it was, but there was some very important CNN analyst early in COVID that was on, and his kid came in at one point and just like walked over and started pulling his shirt. And the
Yeah,
fact that they didn't edit it out, I thought was adorable.
exactly. No, well, thank you. I feel that too. And I think these tools are sophisticated enough. You might not be hearing the squeak, but it makes me laugh every time. Um, anyway, Twitter, as I say, I was there 2011 to 2016. Very strange and fascinating company, and I know we're going to talk more about that. So, in a nutshell, I've worked in technology on the communication side for a long time, and since I left Twitter, I've worked on my own with similar kinds of clients, but happily independent.
Right. And of course, you have a book.
And I have a book. Thank you. My book is called "Taking the Work Out of Networking." Um, and I wrote it partly because of my career in technology. Um, First of all, other industries are very much like this now. This is the way the world works. But I noticed very early on that the fluidity of people working in tech, of moving from job to job and staying in touch with their colleagues and friends, was a big advantage for people. I've often, I mean, I feel that a network is really part of your currency in what you're offering to an employer, and for your personal advantage too. And people outside tech were sort of mystified by how the fluidity of the connections that people had and kept over time. And so I wrote that book to try and demystify it. And make people less afraid or um, actively, if not actively hateful about networking, because it turns out everybody is.
Yeah.
So I've really enjoyed that, talking about it a lot. And in fact, the book originally came out 4 years ago, and I still get called for a variety of podcasts and meetings. And the next one I'm doing is for some kind of association of bookkeepers, because as the producer said to me, bookkeepers are introverted, and they need, if they're self-employed, they need to connect with other people to continue to have a pipeline of business. Makes
Yeah.
perfect sense to me.
It's funny, that it's one of the reasons I've always been so fond of you, both personally and professionally, because so many times, including my husband's parents, ask, "Well, what exactly is PR? What do you do?" And of course, if it's someone who remembers that wonderful British TV series Ab Fab, I always quote Edwina Monsoon, I PR things. But I've always said that our job in communications, and I prefer that to public relations, is really the same as journalists. We build relationship and we use those relationships to communicate. I
Yeah,
started my first Rolodex, which of course calling it a Rolodex dates me, on my Apple IIc computer,
yeah,
which I wish I still had. It would be in the tech museum. And now there's over 16,000 entries, and each of those 16,000 entries I entered, and there's a relationship to them. And
yep.
sometimes I go back and I look and I see where I met people and how to connect them. So I find your concept of taking the work out of networking something that resonates with me. So I'm glad the book is still there. I don't know what printing it's in, but it should be there forever for anyone who's in communications.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
So let's dive into something that was the impetus of this chat. What on earth is going on with Twitter? And I know that you posited this by when we first started chatting about your willingness to do this interview. Thank you very much. That you said, look, I don't know, I'm not there anymore, but just your history with the company, I think people would find interesting as to how different it was then and
Mhm.
what's going on now. I mean, even just today in the San Francisco Chronicle, there was another story. It just is. I
Oh,
mean, Elon Musk is the gift that keeps on giving to headline writers.
I'm not sure gift is the word I would use. I'm honestly, I'm horrified and mystified by all that's happened, but I will say, um, Twitter's always had a long, complicated history. And I should say I knew the original guys, meaning Ev Williams and Biz Stone, and a couple of their lieutenants, first because Google bought Ev's earlier company, Pyrolabs, which made software called Blogger, which was an easy to use blogging
Right.
platform, which is still out there in the world. It was not clear, and that Google bought it in 2003. So those guys all, came to Google then as employees to further develop Blogger, and no one understood exactly why Google bought it. Typically, you want an executive at a company to sponsor, be a real advocate for whatever this acquired team is. And it didn't go well from that standpoint. They didn't have a good sponsor and a clear understanding as Google was growing so crazily about where it fit with sort of the product line, as it were. And so after a couple of years or so, 2.5 years maybe, Ev and several of his lieutenants, including Biz, left. It wasn't a fit for them. I mean, Ev in particular made a bunch of money from the sale, but they basically said, we're going to go make something cool and new, as we often do, right? In tech, that's what happens. So I was in touch with them. I knew them. I kind of followed them, and so the first thing they made was something pre iPod, was audio. It was
Right.
basically audio software for podcasts in the very, very early days. But the minute Apple came out with the iPod, that was death to audio. So literally, they're sitting around in their San Francisco office saying, "Well, let's figure out. Let's have some other ideas. What should we do?" And so Twitter came out of that. And it was basically originally a short form kind of messaging system built on text messages that was similar at the time, the big kind of text and chat service for many people was AOL's AIM messenger service. It was text within AOL, and so they came up with something that was sort of wider than, not constrained by AOL, and they built a way for a while. And when I first saw it, I think in 2007,
Hmm.
when they were letting people in a few at a time to sort of try it, and I was not part of the super early group, but early enough, and I thought, I know all these guys, and they're just, I mean, they were literally talking about, I'm stepping away, I'm going to have lunch, here's what I had for lunch. It was, and I thought, I don't, well, what's this? I don't get this. But within, I would say, a year or so, they took South by Southwest, the sort of tech conference
Yes.
with Storm that year. And by the next year, of course, a lot of tech reporters were on it. And that kind of was something I did pay attention to. I was working at Google. I knew a lot of the tech reporters then. I was a news hound anyway. And so then I looked back at it again and I thought, okay, now the tech reporters were, saying something about not just their lunch, but, something they were reporting on, or a story that was just out or something like that. And I began to see, okay, I can see something here. And strangely, we forget this now, but the next kind of, or another big category besides celebrities were certainly trying it out early
Mhm.
too. And another big category that was national politicians in on Capitol
Right.
Hill. It became another channel for them. And the thinking at the time was, this is more direct, right? This is not the press release. This is not the press conference. This is me to my constituents. And I know that sounds terribly naive now, but at the time, these were not, there were not tools to manage your social media account. You just had your phone,
Yeah,
and
you did it.
yeah, and that's what you did. I remember I started following people, and I started, sort of keeping an eye on things. And after a little while, getting up the courage to sort of post myself, not just
What was
reach.
your first tweet?
It wasn't very interesting, honestly. I don't remember. It was sort of like, well, I'm here, or something like that. It took me a while, but I will say I worked on Google's first tweet because I persuaded the Google team to be on Twitter. And initially, my colleagues were not interested. They said, we have enough platforms. And I said, yeah, but all the tech reporters are on it, and it's kind of a techie thing. So they agreed, and I got to manage the Google Twitter account for several years. And that was, I learned a lot, and I never made a mistake, thank God. But our first tweet, several of us brainstormed it, and it was, I'm feeling lucky in binary code. And that, I mean, we had a
That's
million,
practically a haiku.
right? We had a million followers in the matter of days. I mean,
Yeah.
it was, people were looking for accounts to follow.
Right, right. In
Anyway,
the last, no, go
yeah,
ahead.
so much happened after that, where what did become this big phenomenon. But the upshot, and we can talk about this more if you like, is that it always had a bigger footprint than the company itself. It's
Yeah.
always been a small company. Now it's back to being super small company, but it was always widely misunderstood as to what it was. And it was always much smaller, much, much, much smaller than, for example, Facebook. And people
Right.
did not understand that it was and a different, with a different set of features, a different way to use it. And it's always been misunderstood, including, I would suggest, by its current owner.
Well, that takes me to the segue.
Yeah.
We're speaking with Karen Wickre, tech legend, I would definitely say, and author of Taking the Work Out of Networking, and someone I remember from my goodness, is that 40 years or 30 years ago? 93, 2003? Well, yeah, back at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. So let's talk about Elon Musk.
If
Do
we
you
must.
believe he misunderstands Twitter? And that's, and I guess my question to you is why? And two, Do you think that he regrets buying it?
I don't pretend to understand much about him other than what I read, and I've read a lot about him, and now I'm sort of weary of him. But I would say he misunderstood. He's not. No one understands why he cared so much that he bought it, other than perhaps that he is very thin-skinned, and this is, an avenue for him to, have followers and be paid attention to in yet another way.
Yeah.
It's not clear. He's not by background someone who, I mean, any company he's worked for, he's gotten rid of the PR team. He did it at Tesla long ago.
Yeah.
So he's not interested in kind of the arena of communications or having, sort of a crafted strategy about communications on behalf of his companies or himself. His fascination with Twitter that led him to this is kind of mystifying and to a degree maddening. I saw him speak last April at the TED conference in Vancouver, Canada, and he was a Q&A on stage with Chris Anderson. And at that time, he had said, I would like to buy it, and things were initially underway, but it was not clear that it was all going to shake out. And so he essentially said only, I'm a hardliner for free expression, and I believe we should have free expression. And a few people in the audience clapped, and I thought,
Right.
I mean, that's like I'm for ice cream or something. But at the same time, then the next thing he said was, and of course we'll pay attention to the laws in whatever country we operate in. And I thought, well, then you can't really be for truly free
Free
expression.
speech, Twitter in China or Saudi Arabia or
Germany, even. I mean, you can't, I just thought he doesn't understand anything about content moderation or really a platform that is, all the content, and I mean all, comes from the people using it. And he's not, we must say, a man of the people. He has a very elite life. So
yeah, no, he grew up with a silver tweet in his mouth.
yeah,
So yeah.
exactly. So why he's interested in to this extent, who knows? I have to believe this has been much more full of headaches for him as a journey than he imagined. And I just do not understand what's in it for him anymore.
Right.
But
I
he continues to sort of misunderstand how things work in
yeah.
the product. I'm beginning to question his savvy about engineering.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember, I mean, it only seems, well, whenever it was he bought it, I can't keep track, but it's certainly less than a year.
Yeah.
And when he brought former President Trump back online and also said some things were perceived of as anti-trans and just all kinds of things,
Yeah.
we instantly had two or three clients who asked me, should we, get off the platform?
Yep.
And as always, I try to give my best advice based on facts, not emotion. And I said, look, I personally understand. I said, my personal Twitter account is hanging by a cyber thread. However, I have been a believer for a long time that one of the most useful tools for people in communications for Twitter is what you were talking about. Journalists follow it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how many stories I've placed for clients or just gotten attention because I sent out a tweet with a link. So I said, if you leave, it's going to be hard to get back on. But we've had several clients who left, kind of stuck with it for our business account because I felt it was important to clients. And for my personal account, just because, to your point, watching Elon Musk is just, worthy of popcorn. It's just, it's something every day. So my question to you with that as background is Twitter still relevant? And do you understand why some people have a moral judgment on being able to use it anymore?
Oh, absolutely. I have a number of friends who've left, and I will say I could not. I mean, I've used it for, well, since essentially 2008. So I and for me, it was my first and last place to look every day in terms
Mhm.
of just what's happening. What are people talking about? It had, and I think to some degree still has a real value in that it is the only real-time platform. So in the case of an emergency, a natural disaster, etc., it is where people are going to report, obviously share video and all the rest of it. It still has that value. Now, I don't look nearly as often as I did. Maybe if I used to look 30 times a day, now maybe it's like 5 times a day. I don't know. But
Mhm.
I can't quite bring myself to delete my account and walk away. I do know lots of people who have, and I'm on the others. I'm on that Mastodon.
Yeah,
I'm trying out posts. I'm on a waiting list for the next one's coming out.
yeah,
But
all yeah.
this is a problem of scale, though. None of those have scale, so they seem kind of slow moving. And so at the moment, I'm seeing people who are sort of hedging their bets and being, a little bit one place and the other. Yesterday, I saw some news for the first time on Mastodon that I shared with a friend over Twitter direct message because
Yes. It,
because
it, it, it's funny, from a branding point of view, the name of Twitter is great because it's fast and it flies. I
yeah,
just think Mastodon is kind of like a
the
old
opposite.
lumbering beast. Not,
Yeah,
I don't think if I'd been on the PR team, I'd have voted for that. Well, let's
yeah.
let's talk about another company, which I just read the other day that evidently Elon Musk was involved in somehow, and that's OpenAI.
Uh-huh.
And the new app, Chat GPT. Fortunately, my husband, who's a first adopter or first
Ah,
adapter, I've never known really what the phrase was.
right.
He got on the waiting list early on, and so we have an account. And I've been astounded by it. The last time an app changed my work life this much was email. I
Yeah,
remember someone who you probably remember as well, David Benetti, who used to be at the San Francisco Examiner.
yeah.
And I was the then communications director at Yerba Buena, and I had my first email account, which was Yerba Boy at AOL.com. And since it was my first AOL address, I'm still Yerba Boy anyway.
Yeah.
So and I told David, I said, well, this is going to be great. I can send you press releases. And David said, oh, real journalists are going to hate email. This will never take off. And I
Uh-huh.
remember thinking he was wrong. And over the last few weeks, I've been hearing people in PR and journalists ring the alarm bell about Chat GPT because they thought it was going to take the place of writers. I never worried about that. But last week, I used it for the first time on a day when I was overburdened and not enough hours. And I used it as if I was a secretary. I
Huh.
had a template drafted. And I posted about that on Facebook, and Alfredo said, oh, this is dangerous. All your clients are going to think you're using ChatGPT to write news releases. I said, no, I think we need to embrace how technology can help us. So that's my very long-winded wind up to what do you think of ChatGPT? I mean, they got 100 million users in less than a month. It took TikTok
Yes.
9 months.
Yes. Although, of course, a lot of the early users are people like you who, or about Alberto, get an account, try it out, and then say, well, it's not for me or something. So I don't know that I'm so impressed by the number yet. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm still reading. I'm not, I haven't used it yet, but I'm reading about it a lot. And what I think will happen, well, what always happens with something new coming out is journalists do this a lot, and news outlets. Is X the new, you know,
Yes.
will it kill Y?
Right.
And I mean, in most cases, no, it lives alongside Y, right? And
Yeah,
these things
AOL chats are still here.
exactly. So things, it's not for every use. You're not going to use, one hopes, Chat GPT to write your novel, your next novel. But I can see a use for utilitarian writing. But again, I mean, it needs humans to sort of then look it over and to, say that's not quite right here, or like, let me add something personal here. You need to keep um tweaking it, and only a human can make those touches that make it real.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'm sure that, people who write scripts, as we're already using AI for, customer service
Right.
scripts online. So we'll see, more of those kind of uses, but to replace something else whole hog, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
in the
I was going to say, I can't believe I used an app before Karen Wickre. It is kind of fun. It's a little addictive, but I do find it encouraging that one of the other AI apps that we've been using, I forget the name of it now. It's on my iPhone. I use it every morning to play with graphics and come up with
oh yeah,
ideas for campaigns.
Dolly,
Yes.
Dolly.
And what I like most about it is one of the first things it asks you is you have to verify that you're human. I find that encouraging.
Yeah, right. That is encouraging. Now, the problem with the image ones, which I've also been fascinated by, is now artists are saying, you're scraping basically image databases that include artist work, and they're not getting any kind of recognition, credit, use, licensing, or anything out of that, and things come out a little bit distorted from there, and they look sort of funny and intriguing, but they're they're from this AI.
Yeah. Well, and there's already a lawsuit. I believe it was yesterday. Getty Images filed a
Yes,
lawsuit.
Getty did.
And I think the amount was actually not a B in billions. I think it was a T in
Ah,
trillions.
yeah, yeah.
Well, we've just got a few minutes left. Let's get philosophical. What advice do you have for the young Karen Wickres out there? And talk to me both as a techie, but also as an out lesbian. I mean, we're both of an age where we remember a lot of movements, a lot of times when things weren't as I don't want to say easy because it's that's not the word I want to use, but maybe as far along as far as rights for LGBTQ
Yeah.
people. So some advice for the up and coming Karen Wickre, and then the prophecy of, do you have any idea what the next big thing is?
Oh boy. Well, I mean, I'm so heartened by everybody younger than me, but especially teens, preteens, and people in their 20s, let's say, who are, I mean, they're so much more socially aware of the world. They're out there on the front lines of every kind of thing, being on the front lines, and I feel more reassured because they're not like I was, right? I mean, so my advice to them is keep doing what you're doing and keep, acting out in your life with your beliefs. Because I think a lot of us did not see this thing holistically
Mhm.
the way they do. And so I am impressed by that. And I guess the other thing I'd say is, don't be afraid to try things. I mean, one ethos that I have taken to heart from the world of tech is, it's a bit of a badge of honor to fail at some point.
Mhm.
Just keep, trying things, and don't listen to conventional wisdom all the time. Some of the time Elon should, but not all the time. But honestly, I mean, there's so the trans kids who are like quite certain about who they are when they're even in elementary school. I mean, I'm just blown away when
Yeah.
I see them. I've watched a number of documentaries, um, or news interviews, and I'm like, or Greta Thunberg as a
Yes.
completely different example. It's like the presence of mind that you have to to put a stake in the ground about your certainty, your belief, your following your feelings about something. I wish more of us had it at the time. We didn't all, and they do. I mean, I feel like I want to follow them.
Great. Well, we have been speaking with my friend and colleague, Karen Wickre, about all things tech. Perhaps, when the next big thing comes along, we'll have another chat about it. Any closing thoughts? Do you have any ideas what the next big thing might be, or what you're looking for?
Well, I mean, the world of AI is definitely a fascinating world, and I would say much more dimensional than the world of crypto in my mind. Let's
Yeah.
I wouldn't have as much to say about crypto, but the world of AI, I mean, when I was at Google, we internally called it machine learning. And it took me a while to understand what that was. And that was simply, training on different sets. So I am following that. The other thing that has grown by leaps and bounds that it's probably not over yet is voice recognition.
Right.
That is fantastic for all kinds of people for all kinds of uses. One tool I use now that I love that is essentially voice transcription is Otter,
Otter.
OTTR.ai. And it is informed by AI, but to watch it, if I'm on my laptop and I'm interviewing someone, I have my phone next to me with Otter on, and to watch it literally fill the screen as we're talking and correct itself. It makes some errors, but correct itself as the conversation continues is fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to check that now. And as Alfredo said, the people who criticize AI for not being right all the time, he says, well, that just proves that it's getting more and more human all the time because we make mistakes all the time.
Exactly.
Well, it's
Exactly.
been a great, great pleasure speaking with you. David Eugene Perry here, speaking with Karen Wickre. And please, if you have not seen her or read her book, Taking the Work Out of Networking. Karen, it's been a great pleasure. Ahoy.
Oh, David, thank you so much.